more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. I'm Susan Burrell, and you're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And during the course of our conversation today, if you miss anything, go to livingyourinspiredlife.org, tune in, tune up, and develop your power perspective. So today, I think I'm always excited when I get to do the show because I have just so many amazing friends that I get to meet to have on. But today, I have somebody who's revisiting us for the very first time of revisiting. And I want to welcome Timber Hawkeye.
Aloha, Susan. Thanks for inviting me back.
Yeah, so I just want to share with everybody what was going on. I'm casting about, looking at, okay, how do I want to progress with my guests and all these things? And then Timber sends me an email. Now, in my world, to somebody looking at that might seem kind of like a random event. But as I was thinking about Timber, he sends me an email. I was like, oh my gosh, it's time for you to come back and we get caught up on what's been going on. So you are the author of Buddhist Boot Camp. That is a book that has actually kind of gone global, as you were sharing with me. Would you share with everybody about that first, of what's happening with the whole London?
Oh, yeah. I finished a book tour across the UK, and while I was there, I stayed with different host families along the way. One of them actually owns and produces a television station called Conscious 2 TV, and all they do is really positive, inspirational stuff. And I recently also, because the book is only available in hardcover, and we've been wanting to distribute it to a lot of correctional facilities across the globe.
Which we'll be talking about that.
Yeah. It's connected. A lot of prisons do not accept hardbound books.
Oh.
And so I talked the publisher into printing a limited edition paperback version of Buddhist Boot Camp specifically for prisons. And when I contacted my friend in London to see if he's willing to donate, because we did it, it was one of those crowdfunding campaigns, and we raised over $10,000 in 10 days.
Awesome.
To make this happen. And he said, well, instead of me just writing you a check, I have a better idea. Why don't we create a 6-week global interactive broadcast of a Q&A where every week we pick a different topic and talk about it live, where anyone across the world can tune in, ask questions, and here from the studio we'll be answering them. So the book has been published since I last saw you in also Germany and in in Chinese and in Dutch as well. And the German version just became an immediate bestseller, and it's just been really interesting to see the international applicability of some of the concepts in the book. So between the intention of writing it just to have people close to me in my life, to finding some inspiration from it, to finding out that schools are using it as part of their curriculum, prisons are using it with prisoners, and different languages still translate the same intention. It's pretty incredible. So the 6-week program, I think, is starting October 12th next month. Don't have much more information about it yet because they're still building the website and the platform so people can get a username, password, log in, and actually live chat with me. And
so when you do have all that information, it'll be on your website, right?
It'll be on the website, and the best way is because Facebook is now limiting how many people receive the posts, I would say there's a mailing list through the website. Where you only get one email a month from me, but it'll have a lot of information in it.
Right.
So joining our mailing list through BuddhistBootCamp.com is the best way to stay informed about what's going on.
And then we can watch the Conscious 2. Oh, we could even go to Conscious 2 website.
Conscious
probably.
2's website as well will probably, again, I'm not sure how they're doing it. Yeah.
Well, I'll be checking in on your website, and
Yes.
I know you'll send me a newsletter update when
Yes.
all that's actually happening. And I'm so thrilled for you because I just want to share with everybody. Timber was on our show last year, almost to the week, and Buddhist Boot Camp is not about Buddhism, but it's about I want to say global compassion and understanding that crosses all these different barriers of religion and color and preference and everything. And did I say it? Is that the best excellent you want to add?
No, I'm thinking, what barriers? There are no barriers. There are no barriers.
But it certainly gives you your... Okay, before the show, you were saying that you don't feel like you're sharing wisdom, you're sharing your experience. And the share that you have, that you bring, and you said before you're not a teacher, you're a sharer. And the sharing that you bring really does invoke people to think.
Yeah, I mean, it was written from a place of thinking. It was written from a place of inquiry, not from a place of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing set in stone. It's just one of those invitations to try something on, not gospel. It's not dogmatic in any way. There's nothing set in stone. It's very fluid, and at the same time, you can read it and go, oh, I'm going to try this on, or you're going to go, yeah, not for me. But that doesn't mean that the next chapter won't be applicable. It could very well be.
So you were sharing with me that you are speaking or doing small groups discussions here in Camarillo and Ventura.
Yes.
And you were saying that there's been this discussion of late about the core values, right? And what are they? So, Timber, what are they?
Well, the invitation is for each one of us to actually pull out a piece of paper and a pen and write down our core values. Mm-hmm. What is my guiding principles? And then once you have that paragraph, that description of this is the kind of person I want to be, you cross-reference that with the person you actually are, and you immediately see where you have some work to do.
Ooh.
Exactly. Yeah, I know most people are expecting someone else to give them the guiding principles.
I would not mind it.
Not going to happen. I think that that it is our responsibility, and that we are each different. And your paragraph may look somewhat similar to mine, but there are certain things that you perhaps hold of more value than I do. And so, if I want to be kind and compassionate and patient and loving and forgiving, and when I look at that ideal version of me written on the paragraph on the left, and I write a description of how I really am, and I realize that I'm perhaps not as patient as I would like to be, then I will see where I have work to do. Whereas your piece of paper is going to look slightly different. And it's fantastic because you're the one encouraging yourself, pushing yourself to work on what you need to work on, rather than someone looking at you going, you know what your problem is?
Oh, yeah.
Because those conversations always end up really well. So the invitation is to step away from what we hold so tightly, which is our beliefs, quote unquote, because as I always say, your beliefs don't make you a better person. Your behavior does. Yeah. So, it doesn't matter if your Facebook profile says that you're a Christian. My question is, are you Christ-like? Because that's what being a Christian ultimately means. And so the invitation is to look at it and go, okay, here are my core values. But what you were saying earlier, that in these discussions where we get together in Camarillo and Ventura, and gosh, Chicago, Seattle was a couple of weeks ago.
Oh my gosh.
They're fantastic. We're finding out that despite having core values and guiding principles, we apparently each have a tipping point of sorts, a place where we will go against our core values, whatever they are. And it could be something as big as murder. It could be something as lying. I mean, we say, lying is wrong. But then there is a provision somehow, like a little small print where unless such and such happens, then it's okay to kill, or then it's okay to lie. And those provisions are different for each of us, and that's okay. I don't think there's one rule fits all.
Right.
But to look within and go, do I have a tipping point? And if I do, what is it? Does that?
Yeah, that resonates with me because I think that in my individual life, right? As you were saying that just now, when you said there's things that I will go against, that we go against, that against our values. I do that, and I'm not necessarily proud of it. And every morning or evening or a minute after, if I catch myself, I say, "All right, Susan, you're not going to do that." But what I find in the investigation, in the inquiry, as you're saying, Timber, is when I begin to ask myself, so why do I continue that behavior? Like say it's self-abuse, like eating something. Like I discovered I'm gluten intolerant. I went out and had a bunch of bread. Boy, is my body not happy. But I did it, and I did it as an act of rebellion about thinking that they outside of me is going to tell me what I can and cannot do. So I'm going to eat some bread. And I'm the one that's suffering now because, so that disconnect of I don't know if health is a value, but I value health, right?
Well, we value it until the moment we no longer have
right.
it. Or we don't value it until the moment we don't have it. And then we realize how important it is.
I want my health. Yeah. so that's a form of self-violence, self-abuse in many ways. And if we're doing those small things, because now I'm going to include everybody else out there, but if we're doing those small things, just, not eating a healthy-minded, a mindful diet that keeps us vital, then what else are we doing that just continues to extrapolate and multiply?
And if you go against your core values in small things, what's keeping you from going against your core values when it comes to bigger things? So
this is kind of like I'm as we're having this conversation, I'm seeing this infinity loop because one leads to the other and connects back. So the big stuff that we like you said might go against does relate to those little things. Yeah. So when you say there's your work, where's the work?
Yeah, well, we are a pattern of behavior. We are a product of our habitual tendencies. And so the intention of writing that paragraph of your core values is to create new habitual tendencies that are actually in line with your values. So then your intention and your impact are always in line and parallel to one another. So you're going with the stream of the universe rather than against it.
Right.
I do firmly believe that when we live in line with our values, the universe provides. The moment we go against our own values, whatever they are, we will encounter obstacles and we will make our own lives more difficult, whether it be by eating gluten if we're gluten intolerant, or by lying when we say lying is wrong.
Right.
And then we're stuck with our own foot in our mouth, and it's a lot harder to walk through life with one foot in your mouth. So.
Yeah. It's interesting as you're talking about lying as it is a form of it is the tipping point, I guess. I have an example. I was talking to this mom, and she was sharing how excited she was that her son got his license, and he's really taking care of business, going to the DMV and got it all done and everything. She goes, now if only his mother would do that. I said, what are you talking about? She said, oh, I just haven't, I forgot to renew my license. It's been 2 years. And I had to just keep my mouth shut, try and remain expressionless, because inside I'm thinking, but what are you saying to your son? What is that behavior that you're modeling? You tell your boy it's not good to lie. You've got to be straight up with, the DMV. And yet, and then she gave me a plethora of excuses why she couldn't get it done. So I guess I must have had a look on my face, Timber. But it's those small things that we think we just kind of go, oh, well, poo-poo, it's nothing big, that add up to where we have these massive global circumstances that we're witnessing on so many different places in the planet that I don't know about you, Timber, but it causes me huge grief, when I look at it and watch it or hear something about it. It's just, if I tap into it, it's just, it's not right. Yeah.
It's the quote unquote tapping into it, or as I say, zooming in. When you zoom in on the Middle East, oh boy, then you're going to think all of humanity is doomed and we might as well give up. And when I experience something like that, when I feel myself so surrounded by negativity and violence, I remind myself to zoom back out, to look at the big picture, because the whole world doesn't look like the Middle East right now. It's actually quite balanced, but it's just like those terrible mirrors that some people have in their bathrooms that are like 10 times magnifying. Nothing looks good in that mirror. And so we flip it over and then we get a little, from the big picture perspective. And so I'm not suggesting we stick our head in the dirt at all. We can be equally aware of the quote unquote terrible stuff that's happening in the world. But it's very important to create a balance in our lives where we're equally exposed to the good stuff. Because if not, then we have a pattern of tapping into all the negative, all the war, all the violence, and then we think that's all there is because we haven't tapped into anything else.
Yep, you just described my mom. Love your mom, but totally.
But yeah, I mean, and people have this idea that they're trying to find balance in their life, as if balance is something you're going to stumble across and go, oh, I found it, now I'm good. Balance is something we continually create. And it changes every day, because you may watch more news today than you did yesterday, but if you're watching more of CNN, as I call it, the constantly negative news, then you need to balance that off with something positive on a day-by-day basis, so you're not overwhelmed by it. We overwhelm ourselves, really. I mean, yeah, we'd like to point the finger at the media and say it's their fault,
right?
But we're the ones with the remote control in our hand,
right?
We just don't like assuming that responsibility,
right?
So zooming out, creating a balance, and honoring both sides of the yin-yang, rather than getting caught up in this idea that we're just in the dark side with a tiny little bit of white.
Right. So what you just explained sounds really natural and easy, and I'm like, yeah, I could do that. And then when I go out into the world, the challenge for me, I'm talking about me now, everybody. Nobody else out there, I'm sure, is gonna resonate with any of this, but the challenge for me is continually recalibrating. Resetting, reminding myself. Oh my gosh, I have red hair, Timber. Really, I'm come from Irish background. If I don't have some sort of a expression of my heritage, yelling and screaming and stamping my feet, I feel much better afterwards. By the way, but then so trying to find those balances within myself of, if I'm ranting and raving, taking another breath afterwards and calming down, and maybe catching myself before the rant starts.
Yeah.
Before the red hair really inflames. So how do you, all right, let's just talk about that.
What's interesting to me is when people, you and right now included, saying, it's challenging for me, as you say, to find or to create that balance. And what I'm actually hearing prior to that, it's challenging not to. It's challenging.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm not suggesting that it's easier said than done. It's the easier of two difficult paths.
Well, so here's the thing I think about that, because I agree with you. It's challenging not to, but that challenging not to, in my personal experience now, having gone through a whole bunch of life changes in the last 3 years, is that my intention in the last 3 years has been to live and move in an atmosphere of love, and to be love. And that became my focus and is still my focus. So now I have the feeling of it's challenging. It's more challenging not to be love than it is to be love. That's become more natural, but it's taken strong intention. It's taken, multiple boxes of Kleenex.
And I think it's really important. I know there's a lot of talk about intention and setting your intention for the day. And a lot of yoga instructors say, oh, what's your intention for today's practice? And
which just gives me another to-do list.
Well, I'm going to actually push it farther.
Okay.
Don't just stop at setting your intention for the day. Set your action for the day.
Ooh,
yeah, I know. So because then it's not just a thing on the list that you're never going to get to, because, I had the intention to go to the DMV. I actually filled out the form today. And it doesn't have to be I get it all done today. I have a friend who's been talking for 3 years about getting a divorce and still hasn't. But that's their intention. They're talking about it. They don't live together, But
God
they
bless
haven't,
them.
just because it seems like so much work, it's so much easier to just stay married. But then every once in a while, when the problems of actually still being married flare up, they go, well, why haven't I done this? And then they set the intention again, but they didn't set the action. And so the idea of setting your action for the day in addition to your intention is, today I'm going to fill out one form. Today I'm going to find an attorney. Today I'm going so even if it's progress and it's really slow, it's progress. It's still moving. It's not idle.
Yeah.
So,
but what I'm hearing as you say that is that the stopgap between the intention and the action is 9 times out of 10 in my experience personally fear, and if I'm not doing it, I finally gotten to the place where I sit down with myself and go, all right, what are you afraid of? Because clearly if you're not doing it, it's because you're afraid of something. And what is that something that it could be?
And at what point is the fear of continuing to live your life without making that action greater than the fear of taking that action? Does that...
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So are those the balances there? Because it's like
Well, at one point you just say, gosh, I'm creating my own suffering. I'm doing this to myself. And I can't wait for someone else to come here and rescue me because that's not how reality works. I need to do it myself. And yes, it's easy and we're programmed to blame other people. But that has never solved any of my problems personally.
No, it hasn't solved mine either. I wish that it did.
Yeah.
But so what you're speaking to is self-responsibility.
Absolutely.
Taking responsibility for
taking
your
responsibility,
life.
taking action, and just seizing our intention and really looking at it and going, how can I manifest it into an action? How can I just go from what sounds like a good idea to living a good life?
Yeah.
Because it's possible. It's in our hands. We're either afraid of making a mistake or the quote-unquote wrong choice, but we don't realize that not making a choice is a decision. That's a choice right there. And so by not doing anything, inaction is often actually worse in the long run than taking the quote-unquote wrong action.
Right. Can we just speak a little bit about the consequence of actions? Because I think for a lot of people, the not making the choice, which is an action that you just said, but when you said making the wrong choice, I think some people, when they make the wrong choice, they don't want to live with the consequences of that wrong choice. So then they stay static instead of.
But then they're living with the static choice.
And with the uncomfortable or fear.
And whatever consequences, save for anything major like death or, if you move to the wrong city, nothing's permanent. You can make a wrong choice and date the wrong person, but you can always break up with them. Nothing is, there's this illusion of a sense of security or a sense of permanence is really just an illusion. If we make the quote unquote wrong choice about the job that we pick, we can always pick another one. There's so much freedom available to us. And the only thing standing in our way is fear, like you said.
Yeah. And also I think it's, at least in America, and I think everything's changing. Your generation, my son's generation is making our lives become more fluid, which puts us more in the interaction with nature, with the balance of life, with all of that, as opposed to being like my grandparents were in a job for 40 years, in a marriage for 60 years or 70 years, 75 years, so. And that's the way you do things. And so this up and coming generation, I think everything's shifted somehow, somewhere. The baby boomers want to say it shifted in the 60s. I don't know. But this idea of if you make a bad choice, a wrong choice, a choice that's painful, you can make a new choice, is in some ways kind of a new idea for people, I think, because there are so many people still stuck in the jobs they hate or the marriages they are miserable in because they think they can't make a choice, or if they do, it's going to be a bad choice.
And that's also been my resistance to tradition, because a lot of people cling to tradition even in the face of obvious failure. I'm not suggesting that there's no value in being married to the same person for 50 plus years if it's a healthy marriage.
Right.
It's honoring that we ourselves are of value and that being compassionate also includes being compassionate with ourselves and honoring what it is we need to maintain a healthy relationship with ourselves and with God or divinity or whatever it is, and living in line with our values. I keep going back to that. And if your core values say, I will be tolerant and accepting of my partner if they are not necessarily patient enough or whatnot, but I will not tolerate physical abuse, and then they abuse you, and then you stay, you are, in a sense, not living in line with your values and making excuses, and you're opening the door, and what you allow is what will continue. And then you allow it, and then that becomes the new norm. And so, I'm very familiar with your generation. My parents are there and staying together, married unhappily ever after, because that's, quote unquote, like you said, what you do. Whereas I'm not suggesting that the new generation's way of getting married one day and trying to annul the wedding the next day is the way to go. But there is a middle path there that before we say I do, we actually mean it.
Right.
And when we say I do, we also mean I will. Now, when I got married, we didn't say till death do us part, because neither one of us had, a role model of what a healthy relationship looks like. And so we didn't say till death do us part. We said so long as we're both happy. And it honors the fact that, we want to be together as long as us being together is a celebration of life, not the opposite.
Right.
So there is...
Which makes a lot of sense to me.
And it's logic that brought us to that. And the idea, I don't think any of this is new. The idea of impermanence is nothing new. I mean, that's the way of the world, and it's the way it's always been. Nothing has ever lasted forever. I think what you're suggesting is that this generation is perhaps the first to embrace it so visibly. That's the big difference between previous generations and ours is now all of our decisions are being broadcasted. All of our decisions are available in all forms of media. And when someone makes a bad choice at home, it is online, Everyone sees it. Yep. So nothing is kept in the dark like it used to be. And I think that's the beauty that what I'm hoping by me sharing of myself so publicly is to invite others to not be afraid to share their experiences, to never feel alone. Because when I read of other people's stories of what they're going through, I'm not sitting there judging them for the decisions they make. I'm sitting there nodding my head going, yeah, I've done that,
Yeah, yep.
And it validates that no one has the right answers. And that's very liberating. I think as parents, for example, the greatest gift we can give our kids is to let them know right off the bat that we don't have all the answers, that we don't know everything. Because when a child first finds out that their parents don't know, it's very devastating. But if you grow up knowing, hey, they're just going through life the way I'm going through, and they're just experimenting with this, then it's almost like a game, and it's fun, and it's forgiving, rather than they've disappointed me or they've let me down or they quote unquote should have known better. Right. How? Right. So understanding that none of us came with an owner's manual, and it's all a game, and it can be a lot of fun. But much like games, I play a lot of sports, and a lot of people just have fun with it, and a lot of people take it very personally, very seriously. Goodness. And it's interesting because they go to these rec centers to have fun, and you see them kicking the wall and screaming and getting really upset. And I'm like, this is really interesting, because aren't you here to get away from that? So we get out of life exactly what we put into it. Yeah. And you know that.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break. I'm talking with Timber Hawkeye, the author of Buddhist Boot Camp, and we will be right back. Hi, this is Susan Burrell from Living Your Inspired Life. I always find it easier and more fun to expand my life by being connected to open-hearted, like-minded people committed to being on the same path I am. If you feel the same way, I suggest you visit a Center for Spiritual Living. There are wonderful communities in Ventura, Ojai, Santa Barbara, Oxnard, Pleasant Valley, Camarillo, and Westlake Village.
You'll find terrific people, great information, and more tools to help you live the life you were born to live. So go to csl.org to find a center near you. That's csl.org for a center near you.
And welcome back to Living Your Inspired Life. I'm Susan Burrell, and I am talking with author Timber Hawkeye, author of Buddhist Boot Camp. And we were talking earlier before the show started about a chapter in his book called Versions of Violence. And Timber had Tom Spence, my sound engineer, pull up that song that we just played. So we share with everybody why that has meaning for you.
When I first heard it, it reminded me of so many times when I felt abuse that wasn't necessarily physical and yet bruised me just the same. There's a chapter in the book actually that I called Versions of Violence as a shout out to Alanis Morissette and her song. When I first confronted my mother about being abusive, her response was, "Where? Show me a bruise." And it's strange how she never hit us to the point of leaving a visible mark, but the scars ran deep, and the abuse wasn't always physical. I was 13 at the time, mind you, and I couldn't articulate how scared I was of my own parents. But it wasn't until I saw a poster at the supermarket that advertised a local helpline for abused children that I even knew it was illegal for parents to beat their kids. And a couple of decades later, when I first heard that song, Versions of Violence by Alanis Morissette, it made me realize how I, too, now as an adult, was being violent without even knowing it. The song gave me an opportunity to self-reflect and grow. I'm really extremely grateful for. Alanis lists things like unsolicited advice, coercing, controlling, labeling, judging, meddling, as just a few versions of violence that affect us. And these versions of violence, sometimes subtle and sometimes clear, even the ones that go unnoticed still leave their mark once they disappear.
So that chapter caught me when I was experiencing one of my temper tantrums within my, I was home by myself, so nobody was getting hurt. And I picked up that book, and when I saw the unsolicited advice, Timber, because, again, I love my mom. My mom was the neighborhood therapist. Everybody would come and have a cup of coffee and sit around the kitchen table, and she would tell everybody, give advice, and generally it was helpful, useful, kind, that kind of thing. But it became her default mechanism. I would call, "Hi, Mom," and she'd start giving me advice. No, I'm just calling to say hi. Yeah. I didn't ask your opinion. I don't want your opinion. And as I got older, I remember getting more and more angry, and I didn't know why. Until I finally had to say, "Mom, look, I don't want your advice. Yeah. I just want to be
unless I ask for it." And that's just
exactly.
It's when we're under this false impression that helping is helping, but we don't realize that when you help someone who doesn't want to be helped, you're actually planting the seed of resentment.
Yeah.
And it's actually hurtful. A friend of mine visited her mother recently, who's older and, can't take care of herself the way she used to, but she's trying her best. And my friend showed up, and she just started going through the house, and she picked up all the towels and, went to the bathroom and the kitchen and just put them all in a basket. And she was heading out the door to go to the laundromat to wash them. And her mom just looked at her in tears. This old lady just looked at her, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "These towels are filthy, and I'm just going to go and I'm going to wash them." And the mom broke down crying, and she said, "I just washed them yesterday in the bathtub."
Oh, good grief.
She said, "Who are you to come into my house and do I would never come into your house and do this."
Yeah.
And of course, my friend dropped the towels and cried and held her, and she apologized for doing it. But that is a very real description of how often we do this ourselves. We go into someone else's life and we feel free to edit it to our liking, even though it's not even our life and they didn't even ask.
Right.
And so, and advice, as a heads up, is always better received when someone asks for it rather than when you just offer it.
Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, as a mom, ooh, boy, that's been, with a 20-year-old son, and he's out navigating his life, and I'm watching going, oh, please, 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 just turn left. Don't go straight, please. And I'm patting myself on the back. I'm really being very good about just saying, hey, do you need some help there?
Yeah.
No, Mom, I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay, see ya.
Yeah.
See you at the end there.
Yeah, they don't need you. They have a GPS navigation system.
Yep. Which is called I'm Going to Live My Life.
Yes, and which is what we had,
Yeah.
I just finished reading Siddhartha, Herman Hesse, I believe.
Yeah.
And, I loved how at the very end, when he was so upset that his son left, it occurred to him, wait, I did the same thing to my dad, and it's just such this beautiful thing that we somehow forget as adults what we were like as children, and then we're mad at a 5-year-old for being a 5-year-old, or at a puppy for being a puppy. And my question is always, how's that working out for you? So,
But it's interesting to go back to the versions of violence too, because it, again, we were talking about this earlier in the show, it does tend to extrapolate out if we're not mindful of how our interaction is within ourselves and then within our family or our friends circle. We can be imposing or imposing, I don't know, I can't think of a better word, forms of violence without even realizing it.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of being aware. Whenever we feel uneasy with something that someone else does, instead of being really upset with them for doing what they had done, I think it's good to take inventory and go, do I ever do this?
Oh, there you're going back to the inquiry thing. It's just to ask the question first instead of going, you.
Yeah, go, do I do this too? Or whenever you're upset with someone who does whatever, starts whistling as they're walking down the hall, and you're like, gosh, how inconsiderate, I'm trying to read a book here. Go, but wait, am I ever inconsiderate like that? Do I ever play my music too loud? Or do I ever slam doors not realizing someone might be sleeping in the next room? It's all about self-inquiry, going, what are my ripple effects?
Yeah, that's a good question. What are my ripple effects?
Yes, because we all have them. And interestingly enough, going with that visual of ripple effect, sometimes we do create a ripple in someone's otherwise calm pond, and we feel so bad, we try really hard to pull back the ripples. But as you know, every time you touch the water, you're just creating more ripples, and it's just like, lay off, just stop, just don't touch the water, and just let it. And sometimes just being patient enough. But quite often, I know in my personal life, the more I try to smooth the water out, the more ripples I make, and I just dig my own grave.
So that sounds like you go back to zooming out, that zooming out thing, get the bigger perspective. And
the reason all these conversations, discussions, chapters, all of this always goes back to the same point is because everything stems from that. Because if we were living in line with our values, if we were calm and serene and peaceful and zoomed out, our internal peace wouldn't be so deeply affected by everything that's going on outside of us. We would be able to hold it all in, not be defined by it, and continue living our intentional, compassionate life.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And practicing it is the way of life, yeah?
Yeah, and that's why it's called a practice, because I don't think we ever perfect it. But, it's called a practice for a reason. So it always goes back to that, and it always will go back to that. There's not going to be a different answer one day. No matter how many times you invite me to come back, I'm not going to go, I found a new solution. You can blame the government. No, you can't. You choose to live here. It comes with a price.
Yeah.
And no matter how bad we have it made. You can choose to complain about it, or you can celebrate the freedoms you do have. Mm-hmm. It's up to you. It's up to each of us.
And take action if you feel that action's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. But not from a place of anger.
Okay.
That's the idea is a lot, anger is a great motivator. If something's happening in the world that you're angry about, by all means, honor that and go, okay, I am feeling anger right now. But then calm down, find out what kind of solution am I hoping for, and how can I compassionately get there? Because anger blinds us, and we might, in our own blindness, go ahead and become the doer of the very thing we're trying to undo. whether it be if there is a terrorist group and we want to do away with them, we propose killing the very people who are doing the killing to prove that killing is wrong.
Kind of sounds like insanity there.
It does, you know, but we feel justified for it. That's the interesting thing, because we apparently are being selective in who we're killing, whereas they are not, you know, and we have this really strange way to justify our behavior, even when it's not in line with our values. But if we zoom out, we'll go, okay, wait a minute. Has any war ever ended a war? No, it just started another one.
And that's what we're about to look at right now. I mean, we're in the middle of right now. That's amazing.
It's been going on since. It's not right now.
Since the first little two-legged person was on the planet, yeah?
And that's why I'm not so attached to us staying on this planet. If we create our own extinction, that might be our greatest gift to this planet. And I'm perfectly okay with that.
Oh, you know, I kind of think that the Earth is just fine with us and just fine without us. And whatever's occurring is just part of
its own evolution,
for our evolution. You know, the Earth's going, yeah, I've been here umpteen bazillion years. I'll be here another umpteen bazillion. And
you guys are just a rash of eczema I have right now, and it'll go away.
That's right. You know, it's interesting how we as human beings get so attached to the, I wanted to say our beliefs, but it's more our opinions of how things are supposed to be.
Yeah, it's the should. It's, you know, it's the should, how things should be and how we think individually things should be. And and that's why I love Buddhism so much, is because it invites us to look within, and it doesn't come with a list of rules. It doesn't come with the commandments. It doesn't say this is what you should and shouldn't do. It says, inquire within, you know, what sits well with you and what doesn't. Whatever sits well with you, do that. You know, it's Buddhism. It's not shouldism, you know?
Yeah.
There's no list of shoulds. And that to me is way more inviting, because we're all grown-up children who don't like being told what to do. But as adults, when we come up with it ourselves and we have our own way to live our lives, we're also free to change it as we mature, and to incorporate other core values that we now hold more valuable than we did 10, 20 years ago. Though I do appreciate you putting me in the same generation as your son, who's 20 years younger than I am. Thank you.
You know, it's interesting to see, because I hear what you're saying too about changing the core values, because I'd like to kind of ask, where's the difference in your core values from 20 years ago? What do you notice?
I noticed that a lot of things that I thought were really important aren't really. They were very surface. They came from a very shallow place, from a place of invincible thinking and the values that I still hold now that I held then are timeless. Things like unconditional love and honesty and respect and trust, those things are not only equally important today as they were then, they're more important today than they were then. And the things that as a youngster I thought were of great importance, like what kind of car you're driving, really don't matter at all. And so it's, when I say stick to our core values, perhaps I should be a little more specific and invite us to continually evaluate them as we mature and see if they're still applicable today as they were then. Kind of like the junk drawer in the kitchen. Just pull it out every once in a while and see, okay, why did I keep this again?
Right.
And if there's really no need for it, it's okay to let it go. Definitely don't hang on to it, because maybe one day in 20 years I'm going to need this. There's a TV show for that. So, yeah, I think, you know, I've gone through many periods in my life where everything I owned fit in a backpack, and yet I still felt like I could purge some more. And that's because where I was carrying the heaviest weight was in my heart and in my mind, with thoughts and opinions that are no longer valid, but I was still carrying them with me as if they were. And when I let go of those things, it felt so liberating. I could fly. And those are the heavy things. It's not the material stuff. Yeah.
It's interesting that you describe it that way. Because I've been experiencing some of that purging, if you will, and cleansing, and looking at, okay, really, if everything were to disappear and in my life, right, and I'm just still here, how do I feel about that? And this new renewed sense, especially with my focus being on being love and walking in love, I am always renewed about the idea that, well, it's going to be fine. I'll just find something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not going to be something else.
Yeah.
I'm going to be me, be that love that I am. But I can, in the exterior world, find other things places to live or whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's focus on being love. You don't need to focus on that. You are love. But the walking in love, that is your job, definitely.
Yes.
And there's nothing else you can be. You can pretend to be other things, but you're still love. You're just confused. And so you're walking in anger or hatred or whatnot. But ultimately what we are is love. We are beings of love. That is what we are born from, and that's what we dive back into. And we can pretend to be anything else, but that's just a mask that we're wearing. And the idea, I think, for me to look at everyone as love is to look beyond the masks, beyond the cover-up, and honor that light in them that I know is in there, even when they don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it's ultimately namaste, you know, the light in me sees the light in you and thinks it's freaking awesome. And that's... That's
in spite of what they think.
And and regardless of what they think.
Yeah.
It's
not a hard practice to do once you get the hang of it.
No. And in fact, and again, and even if it sounds hard, it's still easier than going through life hating and playing and covering up and playing pretend. I mean, it's about picking the less of two difficult challenges, if you would, you know, and but it's so rewarding that I can't imagine living any other kind of life, you know. I mean I can, because I've been there. It was just exhausting.
Yeah. You know, you strike me as somebody, every time I see you or even read your newsletter email, you strike me as somebody who really is fundamentally happy. And I appreciate seeing that in you, because there's so many people that I see that aren't, you know, and they don't know how to contact that within themselves or activate it or let it, whatever that is, let it out. And
we don't have a lot of role models of what a happy person looks like, and the role models we have of what happiness looks like is often attached to a certain money amount, which is obviously not the case here. And it's not that hard. I don't know. Maybe it is. Hard is not the word, you know. It's just a whole new set of habitual tendencies. It's just a whole new pattern of behavior, of staying in gratitude, being grateful that I woke up this morning, starting from there, and just being really mindful. Am I complaining a lot? And really, why am I complaining? And
I do have to say, with staying in gratitude, that was the other thing. That was another chapter. As I was going to bed last night, I was still ruminating about whatever it was I was upset about yesterday, which now I forget. And so I open up the book, and it's on gratitude and taking that breath, and I was like, oh God, Timber.
And I think that's the biggest challenge of being as happy as I am, is it really pisses people off. On a regular basis, it upsets people because it mirrors right back to them how miserable they are.
Yeah.
And I'd like to believe that just as misery loves company, joy does as well. And that's why we have our Buddhist Boot Camp meetings, because it invites us all to come together, you know, just the way misery comes together, we come together, and we learn so much from each other. You know, I think that's the beauty of the meetings that the questions that people ask and the answers we come up with collectively. It's never a talk. There's never a leader per se. It's not.
It sounds very organic.
It is. It's like that's exactly what it is. We come in with our seeds and we let it rain, you know, and we see what sprouts and we go from there. And I predict that when we start doing this thing next month, globally, is that people from different corners of the world are going to see a reflection of themselves in others in other parts of the world and go, wow, what I thought was my problem is actually universal.
Right.
And I'm not the only one going through it. And perhaps one of the challenges when we get together in person is people are afraid to speak up. But maybe now that this is going to be online, where people are significantly braver,
Yeah.
behind the screen, we're going to get deeper into some of the issues that we want to talk about.
I have another question for you, and we're almost at the end of our time. We got like 3 minutes left. Because as you're saying, that people will, doing the Conscious 2 TV show that you're going to be doing with this partner in London, and having the conversation and opening the arena up so people can see that we're in the same boat. Then are you going to begin to investigate? I'm hearing action, like action items, or at the beginning of the show you were talking about intention is fine as long as you don't do an action with it. So I'm just wondering. And you probably don't even know yet.
No, it's interesting because, the Buddhist Boot Camp was birthed and named because of the movie Fight Club, which, if you've seen it, it starts out as people just coming together and whatnot. And it wasn't long before, at the end of every night, Tyler Durden would send them home with quote-unquote homework assignments. And, give them... And I've tried that online. I would give people a challenge, like, go all day today without complaining. Just as a challenge, just as an action item, so to speak, of just try that. Put this on for a while. Wear this for a week and see how it works for you. What would your life be like if you stopped complaining? And I've gotten such wonderful feedback from people who, took on a challenge of gratitude of 1 week and have turned it into a year. I've turned it into a gratitude wall in their house. I've turned it into a journal. I've turned it into a nonprofit organization, and it's amazing. And so it's just like the story of the two wolves, the one that wins is the one you feed. And so I can see it being, during the 6-week thing that we're doing starting October 12th, we'll discuss different topics. But if this goes as well as I foresee it going, I have no doubt that it will manifest itself as something that we return to and check in with again and just see, hey, what has sprouted since we last planted seeds.
And that's the organic part of it.
That's the organic part of the seeds of compassion, yeah.
So I've been talking with Timber Hawkeye. It's such an honor and a pleasure every time I get to be with you in person, and I feel gratitude.
Imagine that. No, it's great. And I'm really grateful that, as I said earlier, we did this crowdsourcing thing to make the book available for prisoners. And, I didn't even know. I gave it 60 days thinking, that's the maximum time they give you to. But within 10 days, we reached our goal of $10,000. And the books are printed. And I've already sent over 1,000 copies of the book to prisons and veteran centers. And
and that's great.
I know. And juvenile, just like, I had no idea. And the demand keeps coming in for more. And now that it's available to people who can't necessarily afford it or have access to it, all they have to do is ask, and I can send it to them. It's so wonderful. And I'm really grateful for everyone who made that possible. Yeah.
So I look forward to the next newsletter, Timber. And if anybody wants to sign up for Timber's newsletter, you can go to BuddhistBootCamp.com and get signed up so that when the Conscious 2 show begins,
you'll know about it. Yeah. And it's only going to be 1 email a month. Again, no spam here.
Yay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. And actually, it is always food for thought for me. So I appreciate you feeding me, Timber. So I want to read a quote written by Timber Hawkeye. Oh, gee. That just hit me again to wrap things up. And it is, an easy trek in the wrong direction is significantly more difficult than an uphill climb toward euphoria.
Yeah. We often look at the uphill climb and go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Never mind that euphoria is at the top. We look at it and we go, but it's uphill. I'm going to go downhill in the wrong direction instead because that looks easier.
That looks easy.
Yeah. And I'm just saying, in the long run, that downhill slide
is downhill
and farther from euphoria. It's farther from where you actually want to be.
Yeah.
It's like, how's that working out for you?
Timber, thanks for sharing with us today. I really appreciate it. And I'm just going to end with, and so it is, namaste.
Namaste.